truly owns a homeland, the government that controls it or the people who were born there? 4 British passport holders have landed on a remote island in the Chagos Archipelago. They say they are returning home. The British government says they are there illegally and must leave. Removal orders have now been issued. Prison time has been mentioned. So what is really happening here? Why does this small group of islands in the Indian Ocean matter so much? And what does a new agreement between the UK and Mauritius mean for the future? Let's break this down clearly and step by step. Background of the 2025 UK Mauritius Agreement. The islands at the centre of this story are known as the Chagos Archipelago. They sit in the middle of the Indian Ocean. For decades, they have been controlled by the United Kingdom as part of the British Indian Ocean Territory. In 2025, the UK reached an agreement with Mauritius. Under this deal, Britain agreed to transfer sovereignty, which simply means legal ownership and control, of the islands to Mauritius. However, there is an important detail. The UK and the United States will continue operating the major military base on Diego Garcia. This base is considered strategically important for security and defence operations. Under the agreement, the base will remain under UK control through a long-term lease lasting 99 years. So on paper, the islands are moving to Mauritian control, but the military base remains protected under a separate arrangement. The UK government says this deal brings closure to a long-running dispute and strengthens international partnerships. Critics say it does not solve the core issue, which is the right of the original islanders to return permanently. And that leads us to this week's dramatic events. Who are the 4 British passport holders? On Monday, 4 people with British passports travelled to Ile du Coin, part of the Peros Banhos atoll. They are Chagossians, descendants of families who once lived on the islands before being removed decades ago. They say they are not trespassers. They say they are returning to their birthplace or their ancestral home. According to political figures in London, including Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, the group intends to make a permanent settlement. Reports suggest others may try to join them. Here is the key point. They hold British passports. That raises a big question. If they are British citizens, can they legally live in a territory that is still under British administration? The British government says no. Officials describe the landing as illegal and unsafe. They argue that the islands do not currently allow permanent civilian settlement. So we have a clash between legal control and personal identity. Details of the eviction orders. Shortly after their arrival, the 4 individuals were served removal orders by an immigration official from the British Indian Ocean Territory Administration. What does a removal order mean in simple terms? It is a formal notice telling someone they are not allowed to stay and must leave. If they refuse, they could face criminal charges. According to reports, the orders state that they are unlawfully present. They warn that if the group remains or returns after being removed, they could face up to 3 years in prison, a fine of up to £3,000, or both. 3 years in prison. For setting foot on land their families once lived on. Supporters of the group say this is harsh and unnecessary. The government says it is simply enforcing the law. Let's pause here and ask a question. If the sovereignty is about to transfer to Mauritius, who ultimately decides who can live there? And during this transition period, whose law applies? At the moment, it is still British law. Historical context of the Chagossians' forced removal. To understand the emotion behind this story, we need to go back to the 1960s and 1970s. During that time, up to 2,000 Chagossians were removed from the islands. This happened as the UK and the United States developed the military base on Diego Garcia. Families were relocated mainly to Mauritius and the United Kingdom. Many say they were not given proper support. Some describe poverty, social hardship, and a deep sense of loss. For decades, Chagossians have fought legal battles seeking the right to return. There have been court cases in British courts. There have been international rulings. There have been protests in London and abroad. The question of return has never fully gone away. So when 4 people land on one of the outer atolls and say they are staying, it is not just a political act. For many in the community, it is symbolic. It is about identity, history, and dignity. Political and community reactions. The political reaction in the UK has been sharp. Some politicians argue that allowing unauthorised settlement could undermine the agreement with Mauritius and create legal confusion. They say security and safety must come first. Others argue that these individuals are standing up for their birthright. Nigel Farage publicly stated he is exploring legal options to support them. Within the Chagossian community itself, views are not entirely united. Some welcome the UK Mauritius deal as a step forward, hoping it could eventually allow structured resettlement and heritage visits. Others distrust Mauritius, accusing its government of neglect over many years. Mauritius denies these accusations. So here we see three layers of tension. The UK government balancing diplomacy and defence, Mauritius preparing to take sovereignty, and the Chagossian people asking where they truly belong. Let me ask you directly. Should historical injustice be corrected through formal agreements between governments, or through direct action by affected communities? Conclusion and key questions moving forward. This story is far from over. The removal orders have been issued. The 2025 agreement is in motion. Sovereignty is set to change hands. The military base remains under long-term lease. But the core issue remains deeply human. Can a people removed from their homeland decades ago ever truly return? Who decides the future of these islands? London, Port Louis, or the descendants of those who once lived there? And as sovereignty transfers to Mauritius, will there be a clear and fair pathway for permanent resettlement, or will security and strategic interests continue to dominate? For now, four individuals stand at the center of a much larger debate. A debate about law versus history, security versus justice, control versus belonging. We will continue to follow this story closely. What do you think should happen next? Should the four be allowed to stay, or should the law be strictly enforced? Let us know your thoughts. Thanks for watching AHNEWSTV.